Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers. We're here to talk Seahawks football. We've got a special guest today. Dan Viens is back with us from the Emerald City Sportscast to join us to talk about some mini camp stuff, some talking points as it relates to the defense, and the top 5 storylines that each of us have brought into the show on the defensive side of the ball as we head into training camp. So we've got a lot to talk about. Not a lot of news going on this time of the year, but we'll do our best to keep you informed and to keep you entertained for the next hour or so. Keith, welcome in. Dan, thank you for coming in and being a guest again. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me again. Yeah, this is definitely the deadest part of the season, I would say. You know, right after the mandatory mini camp and then before training camp starts, there's not a lot going on, and it makes it a little more challenging to find things to talk about, but we can always find things to talk about.
Always. So we're talking here about storylines, and we should probably start with the biggest storyline at all, and that's that our 2 shows, Seahawks Playbook and yours,
Yes.
Emerald City, are going to be doing a live in-person event this coming July 19th at Ozzy's Tavern down in Queen Anne. And we're going to get together. It's going to be about 3 hours. We're going to be recording, but we're also going to be broadcasting live. And if you're listening to this, then you clearly like us and you clearly like the Seahawks. You should come down and join us.
Yeah,
and,
a live in-person event. I mean,
Crossover event.
Yeah.
crossover event.
And
Right.
there'll be some swag of some sort to give away, some drink specials, and most importantly, you get to see us. I mean, well, you get to see Bill and Dan, and you unfortunately have to see me because I'll be.
We're going to
there.
keep
But
Keith behind a screen.
That's probably better. But yeah, so no, that's what's going down. So I just wanted to throw that up at the top of the show, and I'm sure you'll hear us mention it at the end of the show too.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. This was something that it's been a couple of months now, I think, Bill, since you threw out the idea that you were traveling up into our neck of the woods for the first time in a while. And then this idea just kind of grew as we tossed it around amongst ourselves, and really excited about the location. Ozzy's is a legendary place downtown, about a block away from what used to be Key Arena and now soon to be reopened Climate Pledge Arena. And so it's got a long history of athletes hanging out there and celebrations after big wins and things of that nature. It's a place that I used to manage back in my GM days. The ownership group is really great. It's got kind of a sports bar feel. We're going to be doing this during happy hour on a Monday. So no excuse if you're within driving distance to not come down, drink some. They have a great beer lineup down there, cocktail specials. And like you said, some stuff to give away, which I don't know if we want to give all that away right now, but
Yeah, well, we can build on it. We can build on it for a while. Just know we're going to give some cool stuff away.
We got some cool stuff.
You got to be there in person to take advantage of that. I think we're going to raffle some stuff. Mm-hmm. We created a great partnership, and Dan led the way on this, creating a great partnership with Ozzy's and the management there to have us in, give us a space, an opportunity to partner with them. And like Dan said, it's a cross-platform, unique opportunity for us where we're going to live stream this event. We're going to have it recorded. We're going to have special guests. We've already got some things locked in, a few more to go. It's essentially a training camp preview show. So it's going to kind of kick off the official off season as far as building up to the regular season. So we're really excited to be able to get together and to have a fun show in person, and to be able to have people come in person and really kind of celebrate with us, getting back together again as fans, and a good cause, obviously, to warm up the Seattle Seahawks and their training camp 2021 debut. So we're looking forward to that.
speaking of getting back together as fans, Lumen Field will be at 100% capacity this season. That's fantastic news if you're been missing out for a year when there was no fans in the stands. But how do you guys feel about that with the ongoing pandemic and everything, having the place crowded?
Here's how I feel about that.
I like it. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's awesome. I think there probably needs to be some safety protocols, but I think those safety protocols are way pared down compared to what they have been. I think other leagues have shown that we can have fans in the stands without subjecting people to further infection rates in those cities that were tied to those events and so forth. So I think this can be done. I think it's necessary. I think that we need to kind of move forward in this and really kind of just get back to being normal and having fans and cheering and have something good to look forward to. I think just the overall thing outweighs any negative thing at this point, especially with the vaccination rates. I think that we're building and we'll continue to build to that point in September, where I think it's going to be pretty safe.
Yep. Seattle has the highest vaccination rate of any city in the U.S. If anyone should be at 100% capacity, it should be Seattle. So
yeah, and even King County is one of the highest vaccinated counties in the country, and it's and the state as a whole we're right on the verge of 70% with at least their first dose for the whole state, which is remarkable. So I do think, obviously, the more people you gather in any one spot, the higher the chances that there's going to be risk, right? And there's look, it's funny. Well, funny is not the right word. It's remarkable how quickly everyone has started acting just like this thing is over, when clearly it's not. And there's obviously still reason to be concerned, and there's going to be risk. We'll still probably be talking about this to some extent this time next year. But I think you touched on it, Bill, and not to get political or anything, but I think we're at the point where anyone who wants a vaccine now can get one. Those who don't know the risks of not getting one. And so it's just time, and they will be as safe as possible. Although I find it interesting that in the Seahawks' own press release, within the same two back-to-back paragraphs, one says that non-vaccinated fans will be required to wear masks at the games. The next one notes that the state's protocols don't require any proof of vaccination, and so they're not going to ask for that. So basically going on the honor system here, but hopefully at the end of the day, football fans for the most part will do the right thing. And here's my prediction, though. Here's what excites me the most. I may get some flack for saying this because diehard Seahawks fans take offense to this, but the fact of the matter is that Lumen Field over the last 5-6 years has lost some of its edge and has lost some of its intensity. I think it's reflected in the team's home record. It's just not as loud as it used to be. I think people are more complacent. They've gotten used to winning. Some people are, we have a lot of people here that have come from other areas and moved here for the tech boom that aren't as emotionally invested.
Let's talk about that.
But I think that's going to be back after it's been taken away from us for a year.
Well, I think it does give you some grounding as far as having an appreciation again,
Absolutely.
or being able to be together and to make noise. But one thing that folks don't talk about a lot in relationship to crowd noise and so forth is the kind of people that have access to tickets because they're so expensive. And I was talking to somebody the other day about being a fan since the very beginning with the Seahawks, and that's why I'm a Seahawk fan and so forth. And when we first started going to games, our ticket prices were $15 a ticket. And we had 7th row, 25-yard line behind the Seahawks bench. I mean, they were great tickets. Yeah. Those are club seats now, in addition to having to pay a club fee to get access to those tickets. You pay the face value on the ticket price. And then if those seats are being sold on the secondary market, sometimes those things can be double for people wanting to just go to a game. And so the normal folks that really are into football, that love football, that would be there at any cost, there is a line for those folks as far as how much money they can afford to go to a game. And I think some of the folks that can't afford to go to the game are the same folks that, tell people to sit down or be quiet or whatever, so it's tough.
Yeah. I mean, that is the thing with the Seahawks being as popular as they are and the stadium being not one of the largest in the league, is that the prices have gone up, considerably over the last decade. And a lot of those that go that are really loud and rowdy and are great home fans have gotten priced out of going. And it's a different crowd.
Lumen Field has been gentrified.
Well, especially with the, the seats that are closer where you make a bigger difference in terms of being loud. A lot of those are really expensive seats now. And so like, I know when I go, I sit in the third level up in the 300s because I can afford to go more often if I do so. So,
just out of curiosity, what are those run right now typically?
So my tickets are in section 326. So they're in the 300 level, in the corner over the Seahawks tunnel, about 10 rows up. If you can visualize the 300 level, there's those first 7 or 8 rows below the concourse, and then it goes up from there. We're about 5 or 6 rows above that concourse, so 10, 12 rows up. And for the pair, it's $1,900. So that's 80 something a game. And they go up a little bit each year, and every year I will go through the relocation process just to see, I like certain things. I like a certain aisle seat. It's got to be an aisle on the right side so people aren't blocking your view as they walk. And every year I'll just go through that process to see if something else opens up that I might want to slide down into without paying too much more. And there's just not a lot of flexibility there. So that's the other part of this. It's not just that things are so expensive people can't afford to go that might be diehard fans and add to the intensity, but it's so high priced that people that have long time season tickets are so enticed by being able to make more than they spent on those tickets. There's 2 seats that are 2 rows right in front of my seats that for years, I don't know who owns them, but it must be a company or something, because there's different people in those seats every single game. And not one time have I ever seen those people in those seats give a damn about the game. They're Snapchatting. They're there for the atmosphere. They're not there to cheer. They're not there for the game at all. So some of that is happening as well. And then there's just the complacency of being a winner for a long time. At one time, about 7 or 8 years ago, I had moved a little bit, 300 level seats, but right on the 50-yard line, about halfway up. Great. It was like you're watching the game on TV, but live. So those are good enough seats that everyone around me in that section had them since the beginning. And none of them stood up. And if we stood up to cheer too long, they would tell you to sit down. And I kid you not, I went there before. You remember the New Orleans Saints wildcard game where Jimmy Graham from the Saints was getting into it with, was it Sherman or Chancellor before the game? Do you remember that one? They kind of met at the 50-yard line. They were jawing at each other. It
was Chancellor. That's the Who's Jimmy game, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not the Beastquake game, but it was that one.
Yep.
I arrived for that game, and it really pissed my ex-wife off at the time. One of the reasons she's probably an ex-wife. And I announced to the whole section, this is a playoff game, and I'm going to stand up.
So, I would have done the same thing.
This is a layered argument, but I think now that that's been taken away, the appreciation of walking back into that stadium for the first time. I went to a Mariner game a couple weeks ago. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. I teared up. I think you're going to see a difference and hear a difference.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, let's give everybody.
It's unfortunate
the benefit of the
that we
doubt.
only get 2 home games in the first 6, 7, the first 8 weeks.
It's bad. It's 2
nuts.
in the first 6, 3 in the first 8.
Yeah.
It's a very road early schedule, which of course means they have a lot of home games down the stretch, which is nice when you're making a playoff push, but it's hard on the fans to not have games to go to when the weather's good. And it's weird. It's just a weird schedule this year.
How do you guys feel about that? Do you think it's a the Seahawks have been a good road team the last few years, but do you think they're kind of behind the 8 ball to start the season, that they're going to have to play catch up in the division?
I don't like it because it pushes a lot of the games later in the year when the weather's not the best in Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see a lot of sloppy games in wind and rain. And I'd rather see them play, these home games earlier when the weather's nice, and let them go play, dome stadiums and ones down in the South and whatnot later in the year. So we get the fun of that too. And it just creates better football and it's more entertaining. From a competitive standpoint, I don't think it matters. Do you want a lot of home games early and then, you start off hot? Do you want them down the stretch so you have an easier road once you realize, what you need in order to make the playoffs? I don't really think it matters, but I like seeing, it's to me, it's more fun to watch the football when things are going right and it's not weather dictated.
For sure.
Yeah, I don't, there's nothing really upfront about this schedule. In fact, the entire schedule, I know that a lot of folks seem to be, and we can talk further about the schedule as time goes on. In fact, I think we'll talk about it when we get together for the live show as well. There's nothing really intimidating about the schedule to me. With the Colts, the Titans, the Vikings, the 49ers, those are all solid teams that I think the Seahawks are equal or better at. And so I think, if we don't split those games, I would be surprised. The Rams are going to be tough. Steelers, I think they're on the way down. Saints are going to be rebuilding. Jaguars, get a chance to see a rookie quarterback that's probably going to be pretty amazing. But other than that, and the Packers, by then we're already in the middle of November. And none of the teams.
And then it turns. Yeah.
And none of the teams that I mentioned are really going to scare anybody. The 49ers are going to be, I think, legit around a mediocre quarterback, no matter who does the quarterbacking this year. And then the Rams with Matthew Stafford, I think, is probably the most legit team on our schedule. And that'll be remains to be seen.
That Pete Carroll will find a way to make this a competitive advantage. Because and we're starting to see it now as these preseason publications come out with their projections. We've seen some last place finishes already from Athlon and some other publications of the Seahawks being the 4th best team in the NFC West. And maybe they take that schedule early on into their equation. So that's something that, in that locker room, Pete Carroll's going to be talking about that. It's going to be a chip on that team's shoulder to come out and prove, that they're not an also-ran, that they can handle that schedule.
I think it is going to be interesting this year, especially with Shane Waldron in that offense, that quick strike, quick hitting, up tempo. And that really kind of plays into the advantage that I think the Seahawks have. Teams aren't going to be able to see that, that offense operate fully, until the second or third game or so. So scouting it is going to be a little interesting. And then
you think about when the Seahawks opened against the Bengals in Zach Taylor's first game and how vanilla they had to play that whole game on defense. It's one of the reasons it got kind of scary because they didn't know what to expect. The Colts are going to have a hard time game planning for that Seahawk offense because they're not going to know what to expect. Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. I think we'll get out of the gate faster than some people think. I really do. I just feel that. It just feels that way to me right now. I could change, but anywho.
We could get into this, and we will. But the whole, the Seahawks being the 4th best team in this division, I
after
think,
winning it last year.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyways, that's for another show. We're like 18 minutes in, and we haven't hit our main segment.
We haven't talked about a thing.
Well, let's talk about the main segment. Yeah, okay. So the Seahawks top 5 storylines on defense. Of course, we just made up this topic because it's the off season and we can do whatever we want. And so here we are. Each one of us kind of brought in some things that we think are people are going to be looking at to try to figure out different scenarios on each one of these topics, I'm sure, as far as which way it could go. And so let's start with Dan. We typically there's really no numerical order, but let's start with, your 5th, your fifth best top 5 storyline and bring that in, and we'll talk about it, and we'll go from there.
Way to put him on the spot, Bill.
Yeah.
Didn't even tell him we were going to start with him.
Well, and the fifth best. So let's see. This might actually be considered the number one, but I'm going to say fifth because I think some of the
Keith said the same thing last week.
I think some of the individual things might rank a little bit higher, but I think at number 5 for me is the revamped pass rush as a whole, and the fact that for the first time in 4 years, after 4 straight off seasons of talking about how they're going to bolster the pass rush, they really went out and made some tangible moves this offseason so that, again, for the first time, I think since 2015 or 16 on opening day, we're going to have, 2-3 layers deep of a rotation up front that should be able to pressure the passer and make that defense more effective. And that's something that's been a struggle out of the gate the last couple of years. And I'm really excited to see how it all fits together and how some of the young guys contribute to that too.
Yeah, that was definitely on my list. In fact, I think it was probably number 1. I have these in weird orders. So this was my kind of number 1. And my header was, is this the best pass rushing group in the Pete Carroll era?
Has a chance to be.
It does have a chance. Let's rattle the names off really quick. Keith, hold on, Keith. Let's rattle the names off quickly. Hold on. Wait. No, stop. Let me list the names. So Aldon Smith, we don't know yet. We've been reluctant to talk about Aldon Smith for the most part this offseason so far. Dan, you had mentioned the possibility of maybe finding out a resolution in the next couple of weeks on Aldon Smith. But if Aldon Smith comes in and he even equals what he did for Dallas last year, that's definitely a positive for that defense. Carlos Dunlap comes back. Kerry Hyder's a great cleanup guy. He's not going to generate tons of pressure. He's going to generate enough pressure to kind of collapse the pocket, but he's a great cleanup guy. Guy's going to be around that action all season long. Robert Kim Dici, it's people are talking about him in minicamp as being a factor. He hasn't been a factor in his entire career yet, but maybe he needed to get to a low point in order to self-motivate to get to this spot where he's going to take advantage. I don't know that. Pete doesn't know that for sure. Only Robert Kim Dici knows that. But if he is that player,
he sure seems to recognize that this is his last chance, because there's been a lot of talk about him really wanted to make the most of this. He is in incredible shape. He's really working hard. He knows that if he, bombs out here in Seattle, no one may give him another chance. Yeah. So he's finally putting in the effort to go with his physical skills. And I think only great things can happen when that happens, because his talent is incredible. But he's never put it together. And a lot of that's been his off-season work ethic and those kind of things. So
let me finish off this list really quick, and I'll come back to Kim Dici just for a second. So Daryl Taylor, we don't know. Nobody knows. Like what we've got in Daryl Taylor, you go back and watch some college tape and you're like, wow, that guy, he could be Frank Clark. Like literally, That's what I think of when I watch him play. Puna Ford got re-upped a little bit on a 2-year extension. He's going to be back there. I think he's got an opportunity, depending on who's next to him there on that line, to have a stellar career type year this year. Benson Mayowa, Alton Robinson, LJ Collier, Rasheem Green. It's deep. Like
some of those guys aren't going to make the team.
Exactly. Not all those guys are going to make this roster.
It reminds me of, was it 2012 that the DB group was so great that everyone they released on the final cut got picked up and played significant roles for other teams? Like that's such a deep group.
It was 2013. Yeah. In 2013, you had guys like Antoine Winfield, who's a Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
Who came over from the Vikings, not make the roster, and decided, you know what, I'm just going to retire.
Yeah. So, well, let's get back to Robert Kim Dici, and we can talk about the other guys too, really quick in this group, because I do believe that this, and Keith, you might disagree, but I believe that this is the best pass rushing group, depth wise, across the board, both interior and on the edges, that this Pete Carroll has had here in Seattle. And the potential is off the charts. And if Kim Dici comes through, but that's all we have right now. That's all we have. I don't know how this group is going to really pan out.
The potential is there, but you're discrediting the 2013, 2014 years where you had
I'm not going to discredit those folks for doing what they did. I'm just saying this group has the potential to be better.
Those guys came into those seasons as proven stars with Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill, and the year before it was Chris Clemens in there with them, and just the rest of the guys in that rotation. Those were not only very good, Pro Bowl level players, but they were proven assets. This year, there's a lot of names, but most of them are unproven talent.
How many sacks did we have that year?
I have no idea.
I bet you we had almost equal last year as we had that year. And this group has an opportunity and potential to even have a greater impact than last year's team.
I think it's a deeper group. Yeah, I think I'm looking at the 2013 roster again, and it was richer at the top, and you had Bennett and Averill who weren't even starters that year. You're starting Red Bryant at the base end spot, and you had Clemens and Irvin. But then after that, I do think this is a much deeper group, and it might have more upside. We're gonna find out.
Which Dan, which player on that list do you think has the potential to have kind of a career year, all pro type year? Do you think there's any all pros in this list, or do you think it's Pro Bowl caliber? Maybe.
I think it's got to be Dunlap, because if this group is as varied and as multi-talented and deep as we think it is, and they rotate and keep these guys fresh, teams aren't going to be able to double team him. If they can keep double teams off of Dunlap, I could see, kind of not a last gasp. I think he has a couple good years in him, the way he takes care of his body, but he could have a 13, 14 sack season in him if those other guys are doing the job. I think that's the one guy that can break out.
If that were the case, he would definitely have the largest impact of any player on this list.
I think is there
another player that could have a similar impact at all?
Not in the numbers. I think Hyder can have that kind of impact just tangibly and just from a football sense. In, like you said, doing the cleanup work. If Dunlap does draw some double teams, I think Hyder will benefit the most from that. I think Dunlap's the only guy on that list, though, that can put up those
that's proven
numbers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
I mean, Alden Smith and Kim Dici, and who knows what we're going to get out of Taylor. Ford could have a career year and still only have 5 sacks. Alton
Taylor's
Robinson,
the guy.
I would say
I think Taylor's the guy.
Robinson. Don't sleep on Alton Robinson. He didn't get a lot of run last year as far as playing time, but when he did, he was really effective. Mm-hmm. He flashes so much on tape. His quickness off the snap is incredible. This is a guy with limitless potential. He just really needs to put it together. But the flashes were there all season when he had a chance.
Have you guys given up on Collier and Green?
Not Collier.
Collier.
Collier had a great year last year. He's not a pass rusher. I mean, he'll get some, but he's more of a cleanup guy. He is really strong at the point of attack. He's a run stuffer. He's a guy that's going to set the edge. He's a great 5 tech, but he's never going to be that dynamic pass rusher. And we knew that when he was drafted. He was never that isn't his skill set. He is more of a push guys, move the pocket, just dominate the guy in front of him, but it doesn't mean he has the athleticism to get after the quarterback once he does that.
Yeah, I'm with Keith, and I think especially if they continue to give Collier snaps inside, that just enhances his value. So I don't think we've seen the best of LJ Collier yet. I think we've seen what Rasheem Green is, and he's a guy that there's a place for an NFL roster for him. I just don't see the dynamic athletic traits.
Do you think they would risk?
I don't see the upside.
Do you think that they would release a young player like Rasheem Green?
I think they would try like heck to get a late pick for him if there was any interest. But, the more I see Rasheem Green, the more I feel like there's guys like that on the street every day. And
I mean, out of this group, you could easily
he's the ultimate replacement level player.
That's true. Ultimately, you could see Green, Benson Mayowa, and Alden Smith get cut out of this group. You could see Kim Dici obviously get cut, and they just go with guys they know.
I do think they'll probably keep more quote unquote, front 7 defensive linemen than they typically do, because we know they're going to play Taylor at linebacker some. We know they play that bear, the 5-man front more now. And so, they could rob a linebacker spot on the roster to keep another lineman. So I think they'll find a way to keep all the guys they think can contribute.
Ben Burkervin better watch his back. He's been paying people lately to get on some starter lists. I hear.
He was a big topic of discussion before we hit the record button. He's currently listed as the starter at strong side linebacker on the ESPN and Our Lads depth charts for whatever that is worth.
Yeah, nice.
It's not worth anything.
All right, Keith.
He had a really good preseason game last year in week 4.
Hey, that's right.
Best player on the field.
All what we've been talking about leads into my number 5, which is Daryl Taylor at the strong side linebacker. To me, that's a huge development. That right there is a lot of the reason why we see KJ Wright not on the roster right now, is they believe Daryl Taylor is the future at that position, and that he's going to be.
He must have had a crazy offseason. Really impressed.
He's going to be basically Bruce Irvin when, during the 2013, 2014, 2015 years, where he is out there doing his thing as an outside linebacker early, against the run, and then comes up to defensive end and rushes the passer in the nickel. And that development with him out there and just getting a chance to see what he can do and watch him move. He's big for that position. You remember that Irvin was pretty small for a defensive end. That's part of the reason why they moved him back there. But Taylor's big for that position, but he moves so well that just watching him develop and get an opportunity to be that guy is going to be it's going to be fun, but it's also going to be really important towards the, kind of development of this defense and what it ends up looking like, because there's been some staples, KJ Wright, in that linebacker core that aren't there anymore. And they're asking Taylor to fill some really, really big shoes.
I can't wait to see him get turned loose. If everything they're saying is true and he's truly 100%, and all of the feedback from people who watched the rookie mini camp and the mandatory mini camp all seem to echo that, because when I saw this guy on tape for the first time leading up to the draft, of all these guys we're talking about on this roster, nobody can match his ability to bend and lean and turn the corner and get around the edge. And so when he gets those opportunities, he could be exactly like Bruce Irvin was, where, whatever his snap percentage is, he could play 30% of the snaps and get 8-9 sacks, because he's going to have opportunities on those passing downs, and he's not going to get a lot of the attention of the offense. So I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, no, he was number 2 on my list. We're thinking along the same exact lines. The exciting thing for me is primarily to do with how this defense is being constructed right now to improve its strength and its quickness. We're just adding a lot of team speed right now to the linebackers. You look at Brooks, Daryl Taylor back there. KJ Wright wasn't the fastest guy in the world, but he was the most instinctive linebacker I've seen play in a long time. I think we're going to miss that, but I think we're going to make up for it on team speed. Daryl Taylor didn't get a chance to play last year, but he did get a chance to spend the entire season on, in the building and learning. And then this year in the offseason, he must have done just a tremendous job to basically convince Pete that he was the guy. Because normally you would bring a guy like KJ Wright in, no problem, especially now, given the fact that KJ Wright's going to be available at $2.5-3 million for a season. There would be no reason why you wouldn't do that unless you were satisfied with your roster. And to see that this early in the offseason is pretty remarkable.
Not just the speed, but the versatility. There's so many different guys in that secondary too that can play different positions and gives the team an opportunity to show different looks. I feel like this is it took 3 years to get there, but they've made up a lot of ground, and they've finally put a defensive roster together that matches up with the offenses in the division better. A couple of years ago, the Rams and 49ers were running circles around us because we couldn't match up. And now I feel like we have.
Let's talk about that for just a second, Dan. This team went into the 2018 season with a idea that it needed to be rebuilt, at least on the defensive side. The offense needed to be tweaked. We've done that. And we did that all along. That's why we kept winning. And Russell Wilson showed that his floor is 9 wins. I mean, that's basically the floor. Yeah. The defense, though, was lagging behind. And I still think we'll have to we'll talk about this cornerback group, I think, is part of this discussion. But the defense needed some time. I thought it would come together last year, and it just was just short. And especially the beginning of the year was just awful.
It did at the end of the year.
The end did, which gives me a lot of hope. Yeah. So, the aspect that they went through this kind of rebuild, retooling, whatever you want to call it, I think has finally accumulated into this roster. And I think you're right on that point.
I mean, even to the point that Pete Carroll is open to smaller cornerbacks now, because when you look around the division, I think we talked about this a little bit the last time I was on, that they're more and more the receivers they have to worry about when they're game planning for the Rams and the 49ers and even the Cardinals now with what they did in the draft this year. They're smaller, quicker, shiftier, crossing route type receivers. And now they've built a secondary that's a little bit more kind of reflects that, I guess.
So I'll stay on semi-topic of choosing a player to talk about that I think is going to have an impact on this defense, and that's Marquis Blair. It's my headline was Marquis Blair versus Hugo Amadi, and both have shown that they could be very capable in this role as kind of a nickel corner, slot corner, whatever you want to call it. But Marquis Blair just has so much more upside, has so much more potential. You talked about versatility, to be able to play multiple roles in the kind of a Jamal Adams sort of way. Only I believe that Marquis Blair is a way better cover guy. So I think if I remember correctly, when Marquis Blair came out of college that year, he was ranked second in the Pac-12 in coverage grade. And people don't think about him in that way. They think of him as this physical thumper guy who's kind of an enforcer, and he is that, but he's also got this great cover ability as well. And that's why he's being asked to play into a slot spot, even though he's kind of a bigger guy. So that's a storyline for me to watch that I'm really excited about seeing him come together in training camp. I hope he stays healthy, and I think he'd have a huge impact on the roster this year.
I haven't seen any updates on him lately. Did he do any on-field work?
They kept him back, but it was only precautionary. There was nothing that would have kept him away from the field had it been more important.
Because they're talking about him like he might be ready to go at the start of the season, which is
he's ready to go right now, according to Pete. But they're just taking their time with him.
How far has the ACL process come?
It's crazy. But he did get injured towards the beginning of the year last year.
Yeah.
Third game, I think.
Week 2, was it?
It was early. It might have been week 2. But yeah, it was
same game Irvin got hurt in. Yeah. Yeah, he'll be fun to watch. And Amadi, I felt like really kind of, you mentioned him, found his footing last year, and he just seems to be a guy that can make plays, and he's around the ball a lot. And,
great special teams player too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, one of the bigger things, like when you say it's one versus the other, is they're very different kind of players.
They are totally different.
Is much smaller. He's quicker in short, in short space. Whereas Blair is a bigger guy and hits a little harder. He matches up much better against tight ends and that kind of stuff. So I have noticed
a lot of that, what roles. You're saying. Yeah, I've noticed that across the roster quite a bit, as far as Pete's got an opportunity now where his toolbox is a little fuller this year, where he's got specific tools to pull out of the box in specific situations that he didn't have before. You talked about the diversity, Dan. That's kind of what I'm talking about, where guys can play different roles depending on matchups in different situations. I think that really helps. You know who would love to coach this defensive roster is Bill Belichick, because it truly is built to be able to switch week to week game plan wise, depending on if you're playing a power team or a gap team or a zone team or a passing team or spread team. They really check all those boxes, managing all of that
and juggling all of that will obviously, kind of determine how successful this team is, and hopefully what we saw in the second half last year. Because I feel like they finally wrapped their head around that fact and how to do that you can't just play vanilla, and they just didn't have the talent level to do what they did in 2013 and play base all the time and match up with teams. If they can carry that mindset into this year and get the most out of this roster, I think, the focus has been on the offense this offseason for some, obvious reasons. This defense could carry this team. You talk about tough schedule to begin with. Going out and limiting teams and slowing teams down and playing good, solid defense for those first 6 weeks will go a long way towards help achieving that.
Can I talk about my second topic? Because it kind of leads right into that conversation.
We love segues.
Which is Jamal Adams contract extension talk.
Yep, that's my number 3.
That's a player right there that you didn't say out loud, but I think that he was in your mind when you said what you said, because this is a player that allows the defense to play in that way, that he covers so much ground and covers so many different jobs on the defense that Pete can, or Ken Norton can plug him in almost anywhere and allows other players then to come in, and it gives Seattle the best opportunity to put the best 11 on the field. And so my question is, Jamal Adams contract extension, is it going to get done? Is it this distraction? Is it worth it? Like, he looks like he's probably going to make close to 17 and 40 plus million guaranteed.
Yeah.
Is that player a tilt the field kind of player worth it in this defense?
I think so. I mean, it comes down to, this whole topic with what Dan was saying. If this defensive coaching staff embraces the versatility and the matchup potential of all of these players, then absolutely he's worth it. Pay him, get him in there before the first day of camp, and just make it happen. If they're going to be stubborn and play a lot of base and be more vanilla and all of that, then no, because you're basically wasting his biggest asset is the fact that he can play almost any position except for defensive tackle.
He could probably play that too.
He probably could
put him at 3 technique and
let him turn him loose. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like he can be anywhere. He makes the entire defense unpredictable, makes it really hard on opposing offenses and quarterbacks and all that kind of stuff. But if you're not going to use him like that, then why did you trade for him? You know what I mean? So he's a guy that you have to know. Last year they blitzed him a lot, but they blitzed him. They didn't just like, okay, you're at strong safety and we're just going to, blitz you up the middle. They moved him around. They blitzed him from different angles. They had him line up like he was going to cover the slot and blitz. They had him line up like he was playing middle linebacker a couple of times and blitz from the middle. They didn't just, it wasn't, these weren't vanilla blitzes either. So I have faith that they're going to continue to use him the way they did in the second half of the year. But man, it goes against everything we've seen from Pete Carroll and that defense from 2010 through week 7 of last year, where they weren't that kind of team defensively. And then, but the second half of last year, they were. So we'll see what we get. I'm very interested. That's why that's on my list as well. As one, the contract, can they make him happy and get him in so they can get 100% effectiveness out of him? And 2, how are they going to use him? Because it's fascinating to me when you've got a player like that, what you can do with them. You can do so much.
Well, can you imagine him and Marquis Blair on the field together along with Alton Robinson and Daryl Taylor and Alton Smith? I mean, they have so many options in the box to be able to play the run, defend the run, create pressure, make sure nothing gets outside around the edges and around the corners. This defense could be very interesting here. It's one of those things that I think nobody's talking about it. Nobody's saying that Seattle could be a top 5 defense. They played like it at the end of last year, but I'm telling you, this defense on paper has the potential, the way Keith talked about it, where the coaching staff could match up, players against teams in specific situations where the best players are on the field at the time. This team could, and if they put it all together out of training camp quickly, this team could have potential to be top 5 defense, I think.
And they should come out of training camp playing well, because most of the core of that defense that finished last season so strong is intact. And it is funny you mentioned that, because I think fans outside of the Seattle area, from what I see online, are still under the impression the Seahawks defense is terrible, and that they, quote unquote, didn't do anything to upgrade it in the offseason, which couldn't be further from the truth. I had the Jamal Adams thing as my number one storyline on defense, however you want to frame it. The contract issue, I've kind of evolved in my thinking about this. I don't care what a player's paid. I trust that front office and that and Matt Thomas and those guys that do the cap stuff for them to work all that out. And they've positioned themselves now long-term by saving some money kind of up front, having some young players in their secondary, about the time that you would need to pay some other guys. Bobby Wagner's getting to the end of his deal. I'm not worried about the dollar figure. I worry more about his durability. The way he plays, and then coming off the multiple surgeries this offseason, can he stay on the field? Because if he can, I think the moment they traded for him, and I've got some insight into this, they knew they were going to have to pay him this deal, and they paid the freight to get him from the Jets, knowing they were going to extend it. I think it'll get done. I think it will get done in the next couple of weeks. The question is, can he be on the field for 16 games? And then how do they use him? If he's healthy, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think when they were blitzing him all the time, it was out of necessity. They needed that from him. Second half of the season, they did more kind of fake blitzing with him, dropping him back into coverage. And I think he gets a little bit of a bad rap in coverage, because the second half of that season last year, I feel like I saw him in position to make plays a lot of times, but when both your shoulders are broken and most of your fingers are broken, kind of hard to get around on a ball and get your hands up and make a play on a ball. So, if he's healthy and can be durable, I think he'll be worth whatever they pay him.
Yeah. And the durability concern is, it's a thing, but he's young. He's really young. He's going to be 25 this year.
And he's shown that he can play hurt. This guy doesn't, you have to drag him off the field.
That's the thing. It's not just that he can, it's that he does. Yeah. And you have to tell him he can't play, and he's going to be mad at you. You
have to take his helmet away.
He's going to be mad because
and his shoulder pad.
Play. Even if he can't move his arm or completely falls off, he's still going to try and get himself out there on the field.
He's the guy.
He loves the game. That's
he's the guy in Monty Python.
Yep, the Black Knight
guarding the bridge. And he keeps getting arms and legs cut off. He's like, it's no problem here.
It's just a flesh wound.
I can still play.
Flesh wound.
That's actually what I was thinking when I said his arm fell off. And I'm like, okay, that may be a reference that people aren't going to get. But then thanks for throwing it out there, anyways.
All right, who's got another one?
I got one. Nobody's talking about a Keller Witherspoon. Mm-hmm. And I think he plays an important position, because if DJ Reed goes out and repeats what he did last year and shows it's not a fluke, and teams, now that they have a chance to scheme for him, can't pick on him because of his height, and he holds down that right cornerback spot. If the left cornerback spot struggles, if it's a significant step down from Shaq Griffin, then no matter how good the rest of that defense is, that's going to be something these offenses in this division can pick on. All indications are people are raving about how he's looked in these camps. He knows the scheme. He knows the technique. He knows the footwork. He had some cleanup procedures this offseason, but it sounds like he'll be healthy. Richard Sherman himself raves about this guy's ceiling. And we know that the Seahawks liked him in the draft when he came out, so much so that if he had been on the board instead of Griffin, they may have gone with him. He's got to at least be solid. Mm-hmm. Right. But he has a chance, I think, to be more than that. He's got the right mentality. He said the other day he thought when he was healthy, he was the best corner in the league. I don't know if that's crazy talk or if I admire that. We'll see, I guess.
It can be both.
But that's a key spot, man. He's got to play. He's got to play well. He doesn't have to be a Pro Bowler. This pass rush is going to give those DBs opportunities to make some plays. They're not going to have to cover for long.
That's a great point.
He's got to be solid.
Yeah, and corner is actually the number one storyline on my list because I think this team
number two on mine.
It's really good everywhere else. And corner is the biggest question mark. Now, DJ Reed showed a lot last year that he can be a guy, but he needs to, he's an undrafted guy. They picked him up off waivers. Now, granted, he was only available on waivers because 49ers tried to force him through when he was hurt. But still, they picked him up off waivers. So he's a guy that I think has a lot to prove that it wasn't a fluke, that he can do it.
If DJ Reed goes down, though, we're probably looking at starting a rookie at his spot.
Or that's
or
possible.
Back to Flowers, yeah.
Or Back to Flowers, or Hugo Amadi taking over as the guy out on the outside, knowing that they don't have to play him Keith, in the nickel.
So Keith, you're looking at either a Keller Witherspoon, Pierre Desir, Trey Brown, or Trey Flowers opposite DJ Reed. What kind of storyline? So when you talk about the cornerback position as being the storyline, what is it that you're seeing emerge?
I mean, who wins the starting job? No, I agree. I think it's Witherspoon. I think he already has the job and it's his to lose. But how does how's the nickel rotation go with Amadi and Blair? Does Blair end up on the outside? Because that's a probability or possibility. And just what's the depth look like? I read a couple pieces this last week about, basically don't sleep on Trey Flowers, that Pete still loves him and thinks that he's ready to turn the corner and, and really be an impact player.
He's got 40 starts in the NFL.
Yeah.
We'll see if that manifests or if he's still the same old Trey Flowers. But I just think that if there's a weakness on this defense, it's corner. And so just watching them and seeing where they're at and how good they can be or how good they're not and what a weakness it is. Like, to me, that is the biggest question mark on this entire defense. And therefore it is the most important thing for me to watch in training camp.
Do you think that they need to just hold their own considering the talent levels from the the trenches back, or do they need to really outperform the expectation level in order for the Seahawks to have a legit chance at a championship level roster this year?
Oh, the offense and the rest of the defense are so good that they don't have to be, in his prime Richard Sherman, the 2013, 2014, cornerbacks back there. But they've got to be good. They've got to be better than Flowers has been when he's been the starter. They've got to be more consistent than Shaq Griffin was. Shaq Griffin has all the talent in the world, and I think he's going to be really good for Jacksonville, but he was really inconsistent. He got beat over the top too much. And they can't do that. If they give up some underneath stuff and come up and make the tackle, which is kind of Pete's philosophy, they'll be fine.
How much of that was on Diggs last year?
I don't know. That's the thing is, was it on Diggs or was it on Griffin? And
was my question is kind of misleading in a sense, in that I thought Jamal Adams had something to do with that a little bit as well, in that Jamal Adams played out of a traditional strong safety position many times, lined up at strong side linebacker, lined up, all over the place. Right. And Diggs is getting used to that throughout this process and hedging slightly. And I think exposing Griffin more so.
Well, and it might have just been because of the two cornerbacks that he had. Griffin was the better one and the more talented by a pretty wide margin. And so he was hedging in the opposite direction and going, looking at the other side and saying, I need to take a few steps in that direction. And it does leave that corner, behind Griffin exposed a little bit more because he's trying to protect the other side. But Griffin's also got to know not to get beat over the top there.
Yeah. And that's the thing I'm looking forward to the most as far as improvement this year.
Yeah. Griffin was biting at some stuff underneath. He was, rotating off his guy, and then trying to recover. He was doing some things that you don't want your corners to do in the way that Seattle plays defense. Richard Sherman used to do the same thing, but Sherman his instincts were better and he was better. He would, like, Sherman would do things where he would like make it look like he was rotating off a guy, but not. He was basically baiting the quarterback to throw it so that he could go intercept it. And Griffin looked like he was trying to do that, but just didn't have the skills to go make it happen. And so it was creating problems.
I was going to say that I like a Keller Witherspoon in this defense, but then I thought about it and I was like, well, he played in San Francisco's defense and he was what he was as far as, being injured now and
good,
inconsistent. He was, yeah. So what do you expect from Witherspoon that's different?
I just expect him. I think he's going to be, he may not be, he doesn't have as high of a ceiling, but I think he's going to be more consistent. He's not going to.
And Flowers or Flowers and Griffin.
Than either of them. He's gonna be better than Flowers and more consistent than Griffin.
I think one thing that's going to be key for this secondary and the corners is because of what we talked about up front, and we've talked about what we expect to be, and I'd be shocked if we're wrong. We expect to be a very consistent and productive pass rush, if not a dynamic pass rush. There are going to be opportunities to make plays. And this corner group over the last few years hasn't made a lot of plays, hasn't got their hands on a lot of balls. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we're not used to seeing from a Pete Carroll defense. I think the key, maybe the key for this defense on how successful and how far they can go this year is can they take advantage of those opportunities? There's going to be some hurried passes. There's going to be some rushed throws. There's going to be some tipped balls. And a lot of those last year would either be dropped. I remember a couple of pick sixes in particular. In one game, Amadi and Adams both dropped pick sixes. I think it was the Jets game, wasn't it? And a lot of balls would be tipped, it'd fall to the turf. If they can be playmakers, not necessarily shut down, shadow, step-for-step corners, but playmakers as well, I think that's what could really put this defense over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Be one of those teams.
One of the areas, and this isn't on my list, but one of the areas we haven't talked about, and Keith, I don't think you and I have talked about this in months, is the defense's ability to stop the run. And wondering what you guys feel like is emerging this year on this roster in order to be able to make that happen, because that is definitely one of the pillars of a Pete Carroll defense. And I just don't hear anybody talking about it at all. We've got Woods that we brought in, we've got Poona Ford, who's pretty decent at that, but he's not spectacular. And then after that, we've got some edge guys that kind of come in once in a while, setting the edge, whether it's Collier out there, Hyder now. Do we have enough in order to really be a lockdown defense when we need to be?
I'm not concerned in the least bit for three different reasons. One would be that in today's NFL, being able to stop the run doesn't correlate to winning. It's pretty much a non-factor.
Why is it so important?
Is that because nobody's running?
Well, because teams are running less, but right. But also because the teams that being able to throw the ball, you get so much more efficiency out of any pass than you do out of any run attempt. So it just has a much bigger influence. So for starters, I'm not concerned about it for that reason. Two, I'm not concerned about it because I look at Seattle's offense and I go, teams are going to be worried about having to put up 30 to 35 points in order to beat Seattle. You're not going to put up 35 points in any NFL game running the ball a lot. So not only is it, they're not going to have to do it against Seattle, and it's not efficient even if they do. And then the last thing is I look at, I think the overall talent. I mean, you've got, you still got Bobby Wagner in the middle. You got Daryl Taylor who will be able to set the edge on one side, and a Collier who will set the edge on the other. Dunlap's better against the run than people, I think, understand and believe. He's good against it as far as defensive ends go. Monet and Woods up the middle, along with Ford. That's a great group of run stuffers in the middle. I just think that overall you've got run stuffing talent.
Even Hyder, like his hand usage, he's great at keeping guys off, and he's really good against the run too. And we haven't even talked about, a healthy Jamal Adams is an elite run defender as a box safety.
Absolutely.
And we haven't even mentioned that we've talked now for how long? And we haven't even mentioned guy that was a first round pick last year
Jordan Brooks.
and played really well down the stretch, who's an elite run defender. That's his ceiling anyway, and his upside. And those guys, I think that defensive line is going to be good enough and technically sound enough to occupy guys. And if they play good assignment smart football, those two guys are going to clean up a lot of that stuff and really
Bobby Wagner, of course.
tackles. Yeah, of course.
Right. Wow. Okay. Is there any topic that you guys have left on a list that we haven't talked about yet?
I think we covered it. Jordan Brooks, I wanted to talk about a little bit, but
I'm excited to see Jordan Brooks in a second year. Hold on to a second, where he's not thinking about playing football anymore, but he's just reacting because that speed is going to really come out. I'm excited. Yeah. The team speed on defense this year, I think, is up a notch easily, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. Jordan Brooks was one of mine. And really it wasn't just Jordan Brooks, but it's life without KJ. Because KJ Wright you could just go watch the tape. He looked slow. There's a reason why he's out there and unsigned is he had one of his best years statistically. He's still one of the best linebackers at sniffing out a screen in the history of the NFL. I mean, just straight up, he's really, really good at that. But he looked slow. At times he looked like a defensive lineman out there trying to run and cover, and it wasn't pretty. And instead, you've got Jordan Brooks, who is really athletic and really fast. And so athletically, I think it's a huge step up. But you talk about the instincts of KJ Wright and the leadership that he brought to that defense. And those are things they may not be able to replicate and replace without him. So life without KJ is, that's something that this defense is going to have to work on. And I think it's not necessarily been discussed enough of just the impact that KJ Wright had outside of his stats. And
I do think that the team is purposeful in this choice, in that KJ Wright this year, Bobby Wagner next year or the year after, because Bobby's going to remain very expensive, I believe, at least through another contract. And his impact is legit. And so we'll have the same conversation at some point with Bobby Wagner. Like what? So I think, they're transitioning on the linebacker roster to develop Daryl Taylor, to get Jordan Brooks in there so that the transition, later on with Bobby is felt less.
And they still feel good about Cody Barton and drafted him where they did for a reason. I love the word you use there, purposeful, because I was going to make a similar point. Them not signing KJ Wright back to this point, and the chance of him playing some games as a Seahawk in 2021 is not zero. If there's an injury, I think he's the first phone call that they make. But by not paying him when he was trying to get market value, simply because of nostalgia, which so many fans are screaming at them to do, pay the man whatever he wants. That's never the way I want my football team to manage their roster. And they set out, when they signed him to that 2-year deal 3 years ago, it was structured in such a way. The plan was he wasn't going to see the second year of that deal.
That's very true.
But he played himself so well. Yeah, absolutely. And he earned it, and there was a need. And then it was definitely, okay, that's it. And we're going to make other plans, and they've stuck to that plan. And I think that's a smart way to build a football team, even though, Mr. Joe fan at home might not like it because he has a KJ Wright jersey in his
And no disrespect to the actual Joe fan.
No, not Joe fan with 2 N's, Joe fan with 1 N.
So you look at that, and you look at 3 other top picks in the last couple of years. You've had, Cody Barton, Daryl Taylor, and Jordan Brooks. They've drafted guys to play linebacker. I think Cody Barton hasn't quite worked out the way they hoped, but
and don't forget your starting strong side linebacker, Ben Burke-Irvin.
No, I intend to forget him. But they've made a point to mix things up at linebacker. They've been drafting with purpose to try and get younger and get faster at that position. And we're this year we're going to see some of the results of that. I still think that Jordan Brooks is the long-term heir to the legacy of Bobby Wagner.
Yeah.
But that means they're going to have to find another starter unless Cody Barton takes that jump and shows that he can handle, the traditional KJ Wright role. So it is what it is. But yeah, they've reached a point where they're like, okay, they were like, we didn't do the safety position well in terms of getting that evolution of different players well, but we're going to fix, and we're going to make sure we don't screw it up at linebacker. And so they're being very intentional in the way that they go about this, and getting those three guys that I mentioned in, getting them reps, getting them experience before the other players move on, is definitely the plan.
I have a quick question for you guys. So what is it about a Pete Carroll defense that puts so much value on its linebackers and safeties versus maybe interior defensive line or whatnot? Like, is this a common thing around the NFL for folks that are listening, or is this specific to
Could it be
defense?
as simple as the fact that he played safety in his college, his small college career, and that was his position? I mean, guys tend to think from the perspective of what their experience is, right? And he was a secondary guy first and a secondary coach first when he started his coaching career. And maybe that's just the way he's wired, and he thinks from the back to the front.
Well, a lot of NFL teams are, they're built around their defensive ends and cornerbacks, the outside, and that's the, kind of the traditional, I say traditional, but that's the mainstream way to build a defense right now. And Pete Carroll's built this defense from the beginning around safety and linebacker, which is weird. Part of it, I think, is it's a market inefficiency. And so you've got impact guys that you can draft a little bit later and get, tremendous talent and stuff. And so there's been a little bit of that. And part of it is philosophy within the defense. This defense is built around coming up and making the tackle. Go ahead. You're not beating us over the top, but you're gonna have to hit that 3-yard check down in the passing game. And guess what? We're gonna come up and make the tackle at 4 yards, and you're not gonna get a first down that way. And to do that, you've got to have great safeties and linebackers who can come up and make that tackle every time. And since that's the philosophy, you're not building around your corners and defensive ends. You're building around your safeties and linebackers who will make that tackle instead of the guys that will get the sack or, the great cover guy that forces the check down and that kind of stuff. So I do think it's just a philosophy and the way that the scheme is built more than anything. But it is definitely out of the norm for the NFL.
It's an interesting question because, clearly it goes back all the way to his USC days. When you think of those teams, who were his biggest name, stud, All-American, high draft pick players on defense? They weren't defensive linemen as a rule. They were,
Clay Matthews,
Cushing and Matthews and guys like that. And that's kind of what he built the defense around back then too. So that was a philosophy he brought with him. It's as with anything else with Carroll, it probably goes back to his early influences, and he's been very loyal to those things he learned early on.
Well, I mean, he's a Monty Kiffin disciple defensively, and that's the old Tampa 2 cover 2 origins, which the Seahawks don't play. I mean, they use the odd front, but they play cover 3. But those defenses were built around their linebacker, especially the middle linebacker, because there's so much pressure on the middle linebacker in that defense to be perfect and be incredible in order for that defense to work. And that's why you see guys like Brian Urlacher just like
that's the name that was popping into my head as you were talking.
You know, like you have to have a guy like that to make that old defense work. And with the emphasis of being on that guy, it just, I think there is that thing that just goes forward. Now the Seahawks play a different defense. Do they have to have, you know, an all-world middle linebacker in order to make the cover 3 work? No, they don't. You have to have an all-world free safety in the back. But yet here's Pete with the all-world middle linebacker and Bobby Wagner. And so he knows he's got it and he uses it in different ways. But there is that, if you're going to run that old Tampa 2, which nobody does anymore, it's essentially dead in the league at this point, but you had to overdraft and go get that superstar middle linebacker, or it wouldn't work. And, you know, I mean, that was who Pete Carroll learned to coach under, is that. So the emphasis would come from that. And so I think it is a product of that.
Awesome. Well, let's get out of here, guys. We've been talking for a while. The great conversations. I mean, you guys have just been fabulous with this conversation and these topics and stuff, and talking about knowing everything. It's like just off the top of your head, you guys come up with all of this stuff. It's just amazing to me. So thank you so much, Dan. Thank you for coming in. Tell everybody what's going on with your show, what you've got planned. I know that we're going to do the live show in July. We can remind folks about that again if you'd like, and tell people where we can find you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever, first and foremost. Love the interaction there, and follow me there. The show, it's been great coming on talking Seahawks with you guys, because I've kind of been on a hiatus. Haven't done a show in about a month. I've just been really, really busy with some other things, and it's kind of a dead part of the season. I will be recording a show here in the near future with Eric Briggs, talking about kind of a Mariners off-season check-in and where they're at with their rebuild, how aggressive should they be in trying to win the second half of the season, and what's the status of their general manager, Jerry DiPoto, and their manager, Scott Service. So I will be bringing the show back over the next few days. Keep your eye out for that, and follow me on Twitter. And then I'm so excited about the live show. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. We really want a bunch of you to get out there to Aussie's on July 19th for their happy hour. Feel free to come earlier, get yourself loosened up, get yourself ready for the show. We're going to record live. We'll take questions if you have them. We're going to give away some stuff.
It's going to be like a WWE event. Yeah.
I would love that. The more, the merrier, right? And I will say this, one of the things we're going to give away is 2 tickets. I'm going to give away my 2 tickets, my season tickets to the Seahawks preseason game on August 28th against the LA Chargers. It's a 7:00
You have to be there
game.
in person.
You have to be there in person to win. So keep your ears out for more details as they come on all 3 of our Twitter feeds and our shows moving forward. And the show is the Emerald City Sportscast, and you can find that on all of the podcast platforms, as well as I'll live stream it at the time too.
Thank you, Dan. So Keith, what's going on? What are you doing like on a weekly basis now? You're not yelling at kids.
I'm never yelling at kids.
That is true. You're not.
I'm not blowing stuff up now that we're officially on summer. And that's actually part of what we do. I've blown a lot of things up in my classroom, which is awesome. But
I'm sure parents love to hear that.
No, they do, because it's fun, and we take safety precautions. But my room comes with a blast shield. Doesn't yours?
Nice.
No, but I'm officially on summer. I'm working on a move, and switching to a new house and going through that rigmarole, and I'm running a business, and I'm, I don't know, prepping for this show and doing whatever we can. I'm going to be actually brewing some hard cider probably tomorrow. Nice. I've got 6 gallons of cider that I squeezed a couple of years ago. Just that it was, they were apples, and then it's been in a freezer. And so I'm going to pasteurize that and get that brewing. and then afterward I've got I need another batch of my vanilla bourbon porter. I'm out.
Oof.
And so
that's so good too.
I'm I have to go get that.
So let me ask you this. So by the time I get there in July, are you going to be moved yet? Are you still in the same house? I think you're still in the same place, right?
We're still in the same place.
Right.
Yeah.
So, we'll have to have a barbecue, and I expect some of whatever you've got in your refrigerator at the time.
Feel free to bring a growler on the 19th.
No,
as well.
the porter won't be ready by then. It takes 3 months.
Okay.
But I can
have your priorities been?
Come
on.
But I will definitely have the cider available. I might have an IPA available by then too. Because IPAs
nice. That sounds refreshing. At that point in the summer.
I'm all about that.
They don't take time, and I'm thinking about brewing a Kolsch as well, which for that time of summer, when it's that hot,
yeah,
Kolsch is like perfect
for sure.
And those don't take a lot of conditioning time. So if I can get one of those two brewed, then definitely I'll bring a growler up. Ozzy's isn't going to be against me, bringing beer in and having you try it when they're serving. Are they?
Yeah, that's literally illegal.
We are putting you behind the curtain, right? So
let's not do that.
There, as long as it's in a red Solo cup, I think we should be good.
All right.
So I used to throw people out of that establishment for doing stuff like that. So
nice.
Love to see Keith thrown out
during our own podcast.
That would just be classic. Hey,
dude,
you would set your reputation up for years.
That would be that. You want to talk about free publicity? Let's do that and get me thrown out of my own podcast, and then people will start tuning in just to see what it's about.
That would be classic.
Hey, Keith, let me ask you this. So I'm in Seattle, obviously, Renton. As we record this, it's Thursday. They are projecting for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, but specifically Saturday, Sunday, they are projecting. The Weather Channel app this morning literally says it's going to be 108 degrees here this weekend. I have never in my lifetime growing up here seen those types of forecasted temperatures. So what does that mean? It's like 250 where you are? What's it going to be down there this weekend? It's insane.
Keith's in Vancouver. I'm in Phoenix. So
what are they saying for you, Keith?
Well, yeah.
Well, they're saying about the same, about
unbelievable.
108. The difference is down here on the river, like we get wind that comes in, we get humidity that gets up. We've had this weird like 70% humidity this year. So even when it was like 84 and you're like, that's great. And then you go outside and it's like you're swimming. It's like so sticky and it's just unnatural. But yeah, 108.
Even Eastern Washington rarely sees these kinds of temperatures. It's
crazy.
Even though it's dry here, it was 100. Like I said in my response to your tweet earlier, Dan, I said it was 108 by the time I got out of bed last weekend here in the desert. And I kid you not, because that day it ended up being 120 degrees.
You know how football teams sometimes when they play in, San Diego or Kansas City, and it's 100 degrees on the field and they change their uniforms at halftime. So I wear a suit coat at work. And last night when I took that off, I kid you not, my dress shirt was soaking wet and it was only 90 degrees here yesterday. So I think Saturday night I'm going to bring a second shirt and I may have to do a halftime change in the middle of my shift.
That's funny. All right. We're going to get out of here.
Hopefully I'll survive that.
I love these
we'll see you on the 19th.
Antidotes. These are just awesome. Yeah, definitely come out to the show. If you guys are still listening to the show, this is an opportunity to interact with us. We're going to take some questions, I think, from the audience, a few questions. There's going to be a raffle. We're going to have some gift cards available to win. Dan mentioned the 2 tickets to a preseason game in August. I'm sure there will be other things. There's going to be drink specials from Aussies and food specials. It's happy hour traditionally at that time. Anyway, we're giving you guys plenty of opportunity to plan on a Monday afternoon to get out of the office early or whatever your plans are. Come on down, have a great time, sip a beer with us, join us for a live show, special guests. It'll definitely be worth your time, and it'll be it'll be a great opportunity to meet us and for us to meet you guys as well. And I'm sure I say that for all of us. So until next time, find Dan at Seahawks Forever on Twitter. Find Keith at Myers NFL. I'm at NWSeahawk. Our show is SeahawksPlaybook.com. And find us on any of your favorite podcast apps. And until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.